Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk specifically about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and entire core rule books that run off of its engine independently. Specifically, I'm going to talk about a specific game today, but I want to talk about what that game is achieving and why it's valuable. Okay? All right. So let's talk today about Spy Game Core Rulebook 5E. The actual title is Spy Game Core Rulebook. It is made by Black Cat Games, and it's distributed by Modiphius Entertainment. By the way, Modiphius is very, very important in tabletop role-playing games today. They're an international company. They're not American. They come out of Europe. And what they're incredibly good at is printing a physical book and distributing it anywhere in the world, not at a cheap price, and that's okay. To tell the truth, I don't think low dollar value should be a goal for any tabletop role-playing game company in the world, and the reason why is it is my humble opinion that very, very, very few people going forward who do not have college degrees will be wanting to play tabletop role-playing games. And I'm not sure that there are even that many now, right? And I think without a college degree, it's going to be harder and harder to support any hobbies, right? So no one should be pursuing a user base that doesn't have the money to buy the product, right? That's just not good business. That's actually a really good formula to go out of business, right? So Modiphius is really a big deal. They work hard, and what they deliver is they deliver physical books for any game in the world to be distributed, and those books are going to be very, very high quality, beautiful, full color, nice hardcover, traditional size, same size as the traditional MMG, PHB Monster Manual that has existed for 5 versions over 47 years, and so Modiphius is really, really important. Okay, so Modiphius is distributing this game. Black Cat Games, not Black Hat Games. Black Cat Games creates it. And what it is called the Spy Game Core Rulebook. It's a big deal. Here's why. So it says 5e compatible. Now there's a lot there, right? 5e it's a backdoor. It's a backdoor to success in the tabletop role-playing game industry right now, right? Dungeons & Dragons 5e practically... Dungeons & Dragons 5e actually does not exist. There's, Dungeons & Dragons 5e isn't real, okay? Dungeons & Dragons, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro has never named the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. They specifically have very carefully avoided it, right? So what 5e really means is those two little, one number and one letter are a code to everyone in tabletop role-playing games that's saying you can play this with the current version of Dungeons & Dragons. Because the D&D community 100% knows that the current version of D&D 5e is 5e, even though Wizards of the Coast has never called that, right? So basically it's a code that the industry can use to say you can use this with Dungeons & Dragons. It's literally the same, core mechanics, right? Now, what's fascinating is, and I did my research on this, the Spy Game Core Rulebook, which is an espionage... Okay, why is this book so special? Spy Game Core Rulebook is a freestanding, one book, 350 pages long. You buy the book, and with that one book, you don't need another book at all. You can run a 007 game, you can run a leverage game, you can run... a CIA game, you can run an MI6 game, you can run modern espionage with this book. Your characters are going to look like Dungeons & Dragons characters. Your roles are going to look exactly advantage, disadvantage. Everything's going to look and feel exactly like Dungeons & Dragons, right? But this is really important. You're like, Scott, this is no big deal. This is a big deal, and here's why, right? So the Tal'Dorei book, right? I really dislike the Tal'Dorei book. I think it's junk. I think it's meaningless because it's not an official Dungeons & Dragons product, right? It doesn't move the needle forward for the industry or for the D&D community. It's just a splat book. It's a setting book, right? And they're saying, buy this book and then you can run in Tal'Doria as long as you own the MM, the PHB, and the DMG, right? But the spy game core rulebook says you don't need the MM, you don't need the DMG, you don't need the monster manual. You get Dungeons and Dragons in this book, but you don't have to own the core rulebooks. That is not a small feat. It's a big, big, big deal, right? And it is some arcane wizardry that Black Cat and Modifius Entertainment has created that is really special, and I really wish was being copied more, that there was more of this, right? So, and the reason why is I go hard against indie tabletop role-playing games, and the reason why is they failed to surpass Dungeons and Dragons. Hey, if there's an indie game that can do player acquisition and player retention the way Dungeons and Dragons can, I'm there for it. I will switch over. I'll be all indie all the time, right? But the reason why I'm against them is they are fundamentally failing in this. They are not doing a good job of actually accomplishing the goal, right? And so what are they, and by the way, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has already been surpassed in design, in rules design, in art, and in rules design and art, right? And even at table play, right? Index Card RPG beats it hands down all over those. But Index Card RPG cannot attract players, and it cannot retain players, right? That's why I don't play it, right? And so I used to. I tried it. I gave it a shot. I don't play it much anymore because it's just not. It's not attractive. It doesn't acquire players, and it doesn't retain players, right? So what's really interesting about this is this game is saying, hey, are you a Dungeons & Dragons player? If you buy this one book, right, you're ready to rock and roll, and you don't need to buy anything else. And if you're a player, now why is it important? Because DMs, a lot of DMs already have the PHB, the MM, and the Monster Manual. Because specifically because a lot of dungeon masters bask in the ignorance of their players, many, many, many players do not have these things, right? And they don't have what they need in order to, they don't have these core books, right? But, so that means that a player who's listened to a horrible dungeon master who tells them that they don't need the monster manual and they don't need the dungeon master guide, right? Because they want them to be in ignorance of their beast forms as druids, and because they want them to be ignorant of every single magic item they get. Basically, they could pick this up and run, right? They can get this on a Monday and be rocking and rolling and run the game on Saturday, right? That's a big, big, big deal. And that means that this book matters, right? It does something that a splat book doesn't do. We don't need more settings for people who have all three of the Dungeons & Dragons books. We need freestanding core rule books, right? And also, that's another thing, is it's accomplishing everything the DMG, the MM, and the PHB is doing in one book, which invites less literate players, right? And that means the game is actually for the masses, right? And it's accomplishing something that Dungeons & Dragons can't accomplish, right? They're saying, hey, do you like the D&D rules? You can play a spy game with just this one book. And Dungeons & Dragons is saying, no, you can't even play this game. You can't play this game with one book. You need 3 books to play it. And you need one play, and actually, and that's huge. I think that's just a huge, huge, huge accomplishment. So I am really, really, really for, another thing I would love to see is here's a perfect example, right? So what was the point of making the and they're doing it again. They're literally remaking this junk Tal'Doria book again, right? And they're making the same mistake again, right? So rather than, they're going like, hey, here's your Tal'Doria splat book. You can run this if you own $150 of other books, the MMG, the MM, the DMG, and the PHB, right? But what they could have done is they could do exactly what the Spy Game Core Rulebook does, and they could say, hey, here we go. Here's Tal'Doria. It's the Tal'Doria Core Rulebook. And what that's saying is that you can run your Tal'Doria game using this book and nothing else. Nothing else. That's huge. That is a really, really, really big deal, right? And that book then becomes freed from the DMG, freed from the Monster Manual, freed from the PHP, and it can be run by a player, right? Like the player can say, I don't need to buy $150 of stuff just to move forward with this other game. And that's massive, right? And so I think there should never, ever, 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 ever be another setting book created for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? That is poor planning, right? Spy Game Core Rulebook shows that you could create one book that will carry the entire thing through using the same class, race, rule structure as Dungeons & Dragons, but freeing the game from $150 of useless overhead, right? And pushing the game into the hands of less literate players and dungeon masters who are not willing, capable, or are not either capable or willing to read 750 to 7,000 pages of content, right? And it's just a much better model. So I'm definitely pointing you toward this amazing game. I think this is the best model going forward, and I think we should have a bunch of 5e core rule books, not a bunch of 5e setting splat books. It's just a much better way to go. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.